We are recording.
Okay, welcome to the October meeting of the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. Please take the roll.
Commissioner Curran. Here. Commissioner Floyd. Here. Commissioner Harper.
Here.
Commissioner Miletus.
Here.
Commissioner Raval.
Here.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Here. Okay, the first item today is on the Southern Oregon update, and we have Representative Pam Marsh and Representative Lily Morgan and Senator Jeff Golden. And I leave it up to you how you want to present this.
Thank you. We are glad to be here. We are going to have Senator Golden lead off, and then Rep. Morgan will be able to give us a Josephine County perspective, and then I'll wind it up.
Wonderful. Thank you. Senator, yeah, there you go.
Yes.
Good
Chair
morning.
Harper, members of the commission, thank you so much for the invitation to present today. I'm Jeff Golden. I represent Senate District 3, which is much of Jackson County and the Rogue Valley in the Senate. I want to be fairly quick and brief. You have a lot to do today. My colleagues have things to say, but let me just give sort of a top line of my experience and thoughts. I want to amplify and reinforce the alarm about what illegal cannabis is doing to the Rogue Valley. This is a crisis that is very hard to overstate. It's related to, but somewhat apart from, the complex challenge your agency has been wrestling with. You know, the ways the permit system is being misused and abused, the use of ostensibly legal hemp as a cover for THC marijuana, some pretty complicated issues that you have in front of you and have taken on. The grows I'm talking about, which number in the hundreds in our valley, perhaps I get into the thousand, I'm not sure, completely flaunt the regulatory system. They have nothing to do with the regulatory system. They have no contact with it and have operated pretty much in broad daylight with impunity. I had some sense of this after driving around with rural residents who contacted me, whose lives have been turned upside down and who live now in some very dangerous places where it's unsafe to walk on their own roads. But the real shock was an extensive helicopter flight over my district in August. I saw many hundred, don't know if it broke 1,000 or not, hoop houses, quite a few of them torn apart in piles of rubble, where the plants had apparently been quickly ripped out of the ground and hauled off. I saw unmarked water trucks openly sucking creeks and canals, and you can imagine what that feels like to a small farmer or grape grower who loses his crop, perhaps will lose their whole operation, as some have this year because they can't access water. I saw clusters of cheap camping tents jammed together with no sign of sanitation or other facilities. I have heard secondhand really hair-raising stories of human rights abuses and involuntary servitude that I personally can't attest to. And I saw and am seeing now as I drive through the valley, real environmental degradation and serious problems that need cleaning up. And plenty of people who have been confronted with heavily armed guards present a very high potential for violence going forward. We are outgunned and out-resourced in every way in this fight and are trying to formulate plans to do something about that with state resources. But right now, I believe a number of growers, sometimes they're called cartels, a number of illegal growers left the Rogue Valley this year with the idea that this valley is easy pickings, easy profitable pickings, and they'll be back next year and years to come, and we have to change that. So we are, as I say, working on a resource plan with county officials and looking for opportunities to collaborate where we can with you. There's clearly an overlap with the problems that you're trying to solve. I'm not sure exactly how they fit together or the best approach of dealing with this collaboratively, but it is a all hands on deck situation, and we have to secure resources proportional to this crisis. Thank you again for your service on the commission and your attention to this really big problem.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I am Representative Lily Morgan. I represent House District 3, which is the Grants Pass and Cave Junction areas and everything in between. I started on this path last year when my sheriff reached out to me and said, I need your help, where we will be investigating a grow that has no licenses, and all of a sudden they will be issued a hemp license through Oregon Department of Ag, and they're giving cover, and we are losing this battle. I entered my first legislative session this year to try to help, and what we found is how quickly Southern Oregon was overtaken by organized crime. In Josephine County alone, every single state in the United States has representation in land ownership, as well as several countries. And we have been trying, my sheriff through the grants that came through the Criminal Justice Commission, have been trying to get to these unlicensed grows. And the frustration of 3 different state agencies being involved in the enforcement of the licenses, but several other agencies related to the water usage without permits or water rights or certifications, or flat out water theft, the labor trafficking, who's responsible for that, the destroying of creeks and spawning beds and such. And so there's so many agencies involved, and it's fallen on our local jurisdictions to enforce. OLCC, since House Bill 3000 came out, has been they've been a great help. But what we found is law enforcement is necessary to help OLCC. Law enforcement is needed to go with the water masters. Law enforcement is also investigating the unlicensed, and so there's a overwhelming need of more safety and security for those going out. And then, of course, the ability to get to all of the properties and make sure the testing and the regulations are the same. We have found that the labor trafficking was more than any of us could have guesstimated would ever be. There's an estimate of about 10,000 migrant workers that have been brought into Josephine County, and our sheriff's office, when they go into to enforce a warrant, finds people sleeping on cardboard under hoop houses, that there's no facilities for restrooms, or their restroom facilities are combined with their kitchen facilities. We had one horse barn converted for residential, but they're literally locked in with iron bars at night. We've had reports of workers being abandoned by those that brought them there, and having to be fed by the landowners who find these people who don't have ID, don't have money, do not speak English, and have just been abandoned, and trying to find who is the right resource to help with that. Water theft has been, and water storage and water diversion has probably been the biggest unanswered call so far. And just this week, the real estate side of it, that has gone on a huge part of the financial crimes, the laundering or racketeering that kind of goes through the real estate side of acquiring land. And there was a arrest this week of one of our real estate brokers involved in this industry as well. Everybody is trying hard to get caught up. It has overwhelmed our areas. We do not have the dispensaries like they do in the urban areas. We have the grow sites. So we're impacted by all of that at such a level. I have to say to you commission members, thank you. Thank you for being a partner to Southern Oregon. I have to say that we need more, that we can't do it without you. And you guys have been the one agency to really take seriously the impacts down here, and I can't say thank you enough.
Thank you, Lily and Jeff. So I'm Pam Marsh. I'm the House Representative from Southern Jackson County. I think the fact that you have 3 of us on the phone at 9 a.m. this morning is really a reflection of the level, the breadth, and depth of concern that we are experiencing in Southern Oregon around the impact of these illegal operations and many different aspects of life. I'm going to wind us up here today simply to share with you an event that we are putting on next week in order to give residents and businesses an opportunity to hear straight on from the individuals and organizations that have been involved in the work around illegal operations over the past summer months. This public forum is intended to really bring together the voices from a variety of state agencies, a variety of local law enforcement to help us understand what the situation on the ground really is and to identify steps forward, which is clearly a really important part of what we're looking for. So this virtual forum will be on the 26th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. If any of you are interested, happy to get you the links out to Director Marks, who is one of our participants in the forum. And we'll start off the forum with a presentation from one of our legal cannabis growers, because we want to set a context that there is a legal industry out there. You all have done yeoman's work over the last few years to set that up. We believe that legal operators are not our problem, so we want to set that context. And after the presentation from the legal operator, we'll go to the Oregon Department of Agriculture so that people can understand what the regulatory framework is for legal hemp. Then we'll have a presentation on Operation Table Rock, which of course was a joint effort between Department of Ag and OLCC to go out to allegedly hemp operators and actually do some testing and figure out what's happening on the ground. And I think the results of that are fairly disturbing. We'll then shift to our local law enforcement. We'll have our Jackson County Sheriff talk about the efforts over this summer. We will move to Jackson County code compliance, because code compliance is very definitely another enforcement mechanism we've had in action here. We'll talk to our water master, because as Rep. Morgan noted, we're in a prolonged drought here in Southern Oregon. We are suffering, and to see people who are very likely illegal operations using that precious water just adds insult to injury for local residents. And then we'll go to worker issues. We are going to have a presentation from Unite, which is our farm worker organization down here, talking about the work that they can do to intercede on behalf of workers. And I think this is an area in which, frankly, we need much more state agency participation and assistance in future grow years. And then Director Marks is going to have a big role in the summation. All along during this presentation, we'll be asking all of the speakers from their perspectives to identify a couple of next steps, whether that's a policy change, simply more money, some combination of that, so that we're able to sort of put together an idea overall of next steps. And Director Marks is going to help us summarize that and also talk about the task force that is just getting underway as a result of House Bill 3000. And we'll also have a presentation or remarks from the Criminal Justice Commission, which does handle the law enforcement money that comes out of the top of cannabis money and then to law enforcement via grants across the state. We know that we need to increase that money. We probably also need to expand its usage so that we can get some effective worker protections on the ground. And we'll have the director of the Criminal Justice Commission talk about that. So we are trying, go through this to just indicate that we here in the Valley are really trying to take a multidimensional approach to this. We know that the industry has caused multiple problems around water and workers and public safety. And we know that the solutions also have to be multidimensional. So we are in the process of trying to identify those, and very much appreciate the partnership of OLCC, both to this point and in the future as we move the work forward. And thank you for the chance to be here today and talk about what we're seeing down here.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Commissioners, any questions?
Oh, I was just going to say thank you. It's impressive to see both houses and both parties coming together on this, and we've been briefed on some of it, and it's been, we've all been proud of the agency and everything that's done, so thank you.
So let me make a couple of comments. Thank you again for being here with us this morning. I took the prerogative as chairman of this committee to ask Director Marks to make sure we could get people and members of the legislature from the Valley on this call. Senator Golden, I took a look at that overview and the helicopter overview in August, and I immediately knew the scope and depth of this problem. It was overwhelming, and I'm sure the rest of the commissioners understood the same thing. I think Representative Morgan said this morning, we can't do it without you. Well, I want to throw that back at you, because we can't do this without you. And without you, the task force is not going to be as effective as we hope it's going to be as well. Because this is such a big issue, and you've talked about every single issue. We understand it all. But it's going to be up to the three of you and the rest of the members of the legislature in the Valley to keep this in the forefront for a long time to come, because the problem's coming back again. And without the help of the legislature, we're not going to solve this issue. The scope and depth of this thing is something that has to be continuously brought in front of the legislature so that the whole state understands the seriousness of this. I can't stress that strong enough. And we can't do it without you. And I think, you know, if you want to come back every month or every 2 months and come back and give us an update and keep this in the front burner, that's wonderful, because the potential enormous problems that you're facing aren't going away. And whatever we can do to help, we want to be here to help you on it. But you're going to have to really be in the front of this. I know how the legislative process works. I've been part of it in the past, and all three of you have wonderful reputations in the legislature, and it's really up to you to make sure that we can't do it without you. So, thank you. And you're invited back here. And if you want to get other members of the legislature back in front of us, that's great, because you're going to have to go back to them and ask them for help, because we can't do this without the complete support of the entire legislature. We understand that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here.
Okay, report from the Oregon Brewers Guild Executive Director, Christina LaRue. Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice.
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. Chairman, Commissioners, Director Marks, and all attendees. For those who don't know me, my name is Christina LaRue. I'm the Executive Director of the Oregon Brewers Guild. Laura, should I share my screen, or do you have my slides?
Sorry, I do have your slides, so I was gonna share the screen.
Oh, thank you.
Just one second. Okay, hold on.
It's okay, no worries. I won't take up too much time today. We have just a quick update.
Can you see that?
All right. I can see it, yes.
Okay, you tell me when to switch. Okay, what's happening? Sorry, guys. Christina, you ready? Where's she at? Oh, goodness. Did we lose a bunch of people? Commissioner Harper, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, Michael Harper.
Okay, it looks like we might have lost a few people. Christine, are you on? Ah, she's coming back. Are you there? Unmute. You look. There you go.
Boy, technology. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay, sorry. Technology is not my friend this morning.
that's okay.
Okay. So again, my name is Christina LaRue. Sorry about that. Executive Director. For those that don't know who the Oregon Brewers Guild is, we were established in '92. We're a nonprofit advocacy organization that really gives a voice to Oregon craft beer, about the 300 breweries, brew pubs, and tasting rooms. And we do that through events, education, enthusiast programs, and then also especially legislative work. Next slide, please. So just a brief update on the economic impact to our members over the last 18 months. We did see substantial losses in 2020, along with so many other people. Year-end 2020 versus year-end 2019 saw about 324,000 barrels in loss in sales. In the state of Oregon, that's about 22% reduction from 2019. Although the state has reopened and most restrictions are lifted, recovery has been challenging and has been slow. Beer sales for Q1 of 2021 versus Q1 of 2022, we saw a loss of about 83,000 barrels with production down by over 9%. Looking at April of this year versus April last year, we're down about 30%, and May we're down about 31%. Numbers from June on aren't exactly accurate. We're working on getting all of our members online with the new online privilege tax system. And so once that everyone is into the system and current, we'll be able to update you with those numbers. On a federal side, looking at statewide, the country saw in craft about a 9.3% decrease, which is about 22 million barrels loss in 2020, with production down by about 9.2 across the country. One of the major pandemic-related issues that our members continue to be affected by is staffing shortages. We have seen our members either choose to close multiple days a week because they can't staff properly, close their kitchens and move to either food trucks or allowing folks to bring food in, change their hours where they're either opening later or closing earlier. And that it continues to be an issue. We saw a mass exodus of hospitality industry employees. And then they're also having, issues with having to quarantine and isolate their staff if they have an exposure. So hopefully, as we move forward and more people are vaccinated, that issue becomes less of an issue. Next slide, please. So our current items of interest, projects that we continue to work on. So we are working closely with the members of the OLCC Privilege Tax Team and Director Marks on some issues that are related to the online reporting system. It's been a great relationship. We've been able to have open dialogue and communication and work together to map out the user-friendly issues. So we hope to have those hopefully within the next month or so that we can get all of our members online into the system and brought current on their taxes. RTDs, we recently had a meeting with OLCC and Representative Wilde to discuss possible legislation for the 2022 session that would allow RTDs to be brought into the grocery store. And that is something that our members and the Guild strongly oppose. And then we're also continuing to monitor supply chain issues and cost inflation. So as I'm sure everyone is aware, tankers or ships sitting off the coast of multiple ports, issues with shortage of truck drivers, stainless issues from just across the board. The supply chain has been difficult over the last month or so. And with that, there's cost inflation that is associated. So we're just keeping a very close eye on that.
Can you tell us, did you do any analysis of how much it would cost you if it were sold at grocery store level, roughly?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Have you done any analysis that if legislation passes to allow it to be sold at grocery store level, how much you would lose?
No, I have not personally yet done that analysis, but I can bring that to you to the next meeting. Absolutely. Or I can share that. I can send that your way. I will absolutely do that.
Well, send it to everybody because if this is going to be an issue, you're going to have to do some sort of an analysis on it. Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely. We're working with our team and our lobbyist. Our biggest concern is shelf space loss is the major concern for our members. But yes, I will do that and I will get that to you next week.
Good.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Commissioner?
This is Commissioner Raval.
Yes, sir.
So you said your main issue is shelf space?
Shelf space. Mm-hmm.
Don't have any other issues with the request of some of these manufacturers to privatize its sale?
We do. We do. Privatization is we do have concerns. We feel that bringing RTDs to the shelf would be a slippery slope.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good question.
Thank you for asking. And then on the federal side, so we work very closely with the Brewers Association, which is the national organization. And right now, their biggest project is a federal anti-competitive initiative. So in July, President Biden and his administration issued an executive order to promote fair and open and competitive marketplace. This includes the craft beer industry. The Brewers Association has submitted their comments to the TTB and the federal government on why they fully support this initiative. It would allow for federal agencies such as the TTB to do further investigations on anti-competitive barriers across multiple industries. With this executive order, the TTB was tasked with opening an investigation and called for public feedback, and that's where the Brewers Association has submitted their comments, which state guilds from across the country signed on to in support. And now the TTB, that period is closed, and they will now consider any potential actions needed. The Brewers Association, again, we support their initiative to ensure that craft beer industry has a voice at the table and to provide examples of how the TTB can help address exclusionary and illegal trade practices, so such as pay to play, incentives for sales, whether it's retailers or distributors, etc. So as that moves forward, I'll be more than happy to update the commission when we hear more back on that. That is my update. Try to keep it short and sweet and to the point. If there's any questions, I'm free now to answer any that you may have, or you can also email me.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions? Christina, thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing
My pleasure.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you. My pleasure.
City of Portland Cannabis Policy Oversight Team Update. Nishita Dorset. Nice seeing you again.
Not sure if she's on. Nishita, are you on the line?
Nishita?
I don't remember seeing that.
I don't either.
Yeah, anybody from CPOP?
Is anybody from the city of Portland on the line? I guess not.
Well, we can always come back.
Okay.
Let's keep on going. Was there a confirmation that they were going to be on? I assume so.
Mhm.
I see some of the members.
You see some on?
Well, I see some of the members of the CPOT board, but I don't know if they're prepared to give the
Probably not.
presentation.
Let's see who was on this on the front page. So Joanna Hardesty.
No, she's the commissioner. Adele.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I'm Christina Corsi. I'm from the city of Portland. I was just here to watch Nishita. I'm not ready to present though. I can get a hold of her and see if she'll be joining us.
That would be great. Thank you, Christina.
Chris, you're up.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning,
Hello.
Commissioners.
Where is Chris?
Hello.
Good morning.
There you go.
I've been trying to grow that the last month. So.
You're doing a good job.
So, good morning, Chairman, again. Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Chris Mayton. I am the Distilled Spirits Program Director for the OLCC, and I am here today to provide you with another brief monthly update on the warehouse relocation and headquarters projects. This one's going to be a little bit longer because there's been a lot of activity by a great number of people in the agency over the last month. So first, I'd like to talk about the construction project manager that we've been doing interviews for. So staff has concluded that interview processes with the third-party construction management companies on a master contract and have selected Anisi for the project. They will be our project manager. That company is a local company, started back in 1999 here in Portland. They offer a full range of services that guide projects from concept and design through construction and occupancy.
How big a company?
Their portfolio is about 1.1 billion in their completed project portfolio right now. Staff are currently working with the procurement specialist from DAS Real Estate and an EC to draft the scope of the work and subsequently sign the contract. So we've selected them. Now we have to negotiate the terms of that and decide what the scope of it will be and how much it will cost. And that's ongoing right now.
You mean to say you didn't get a feel for them before you got to that point?
We have to review them all equitably, so we have to do a little bit more, but we do have an idea. Yes. Okay. The second piece here is really the Milwaukee property partition. And that is staff has continues to work with DOJ, Clackamas County, and DAS Real Estate regarding the partition of the McLaughlin property that Clackamas County currently occupies, which is just behind the creek bed there. That's a small sliver of property along the west side of Johnson Creek. It's just below 3 acres of land there. Clackamas County has verbally agreed to pay for all fees associated with this partitioning already, but there are several considerations for that property. First, Clackamas County owns all the improvements on the land. Second is setbacks exist along Ochoco, which is up to a 30-foot maximum. Flood hazards exist along the creek, and water quality resource area and habitat conservation area limit the maximum developable area behind it. You'll hear more about that from the technical expert, Jeff Samuels, our administrative facilities director, in the future, but I just wanted to give you kind of a concept of what's being discussed around that sliver right now. And then probably the most exciting news is the property, and we're getting closer. DAS Real Estate Service and our broker, Cushman Wakefield, have received the initial responses from the proposers. OLCC staff are currently working with DAS Real Estate and Cushman Wakefield to provide further clarification and direction on the continued negotiations. As soon as these negotiations are complete, staff will then schedule an executive session with you, the commissioners, for direction and final selection. Following that final selection, staff will work with DAS Real Estate and Cushman Wakefield to develop the purchase sales agreement contract. We are on track for a February 2022 contract execution. So we are making progress and getting closer, and the window is closing. So with that, I'll give you just kind of an overview on sales and distribution. Brian and his team have been doing a great job keeping up with the demand. Sales again in September were up just under 6.5%, which was about a $4 million improvement over prior year. And everybody knows the COVID year was the biggest year. So it just continues to get bigger, which means Nikki and her team are working doubly hard to get things done. And with the vaccination order that went into effect, we lost approximately 28% of our workforce for a short period of time. People that did not have both shots by the 18th at midnight had to go home. And we lost 14 people out of the day shift warehouse total, which is 28% of our crew. Nikki has devised a plan, countermeasures. The doors are still open. We're still shipping. We have the dates on all those employees are coming back. All of them as of this point. I can say there's only 2 that we're unsure if they'll be coming back or not. It just depends. So the impact has been tough, but we're managing through it. We faced deeper holes before when COVID first struck. So I feel really good, and I've got a really strong team behind me. And Stephen will allow the latitude of our department to make the decision we need to keep the revenue streams flowing for the state. So,
Chris, you said that was 28%. That was about 14, a loss of 14 people in the warehouse.
mm-hmm.
What are you left with? How many? So how many do you have?
So I have 42 on the day shift.
42 on the day.
And that's 14% of them. On the swing shift, we lost 5, and we typically have 21. on swing shifts. So that's about 25% of that group as well.
Wow. Wow. What are the plans in making up for that loss?
Well, what we do is we redistribute the workload amongst the employees that are here. We add more labor into the warehouse where we can through temporary services, just by hiring. Most of the time, though, the ability to hire somebody and keep the work going, you have a 2 to 4 week gap. So we just have higher expectations of our people, and our team gets out there and helps wherever we can. When I say team, I mean the management team.
Right.
They do what they need to do. It sleeves up everybody in the warehouse. Even they called me and said, if we need an equipment operator, Chris, can you drive a forklift? I said, absolutely. Just call me. I'll come down and do it. I mean, we do what we need to do to get the cases on the back of the truck. Because feeding the stores and keeping the businesses open in the state is what we're responsible for. So.
Absolutely.
As we're going into holiday season, could this impact some of the holiday packages and specialty things that are supposed to be maybe being distributed maybe now? Is it right about
It's
now?
going, they're starting to go out right now. So there's good news, bad news with that. So good news is there's been a little bit of a delay in some of this, the highly allocated products because supply chains are experiencing the same struggles. So that delay gives me a little time to get my people back into the warehouse. So that's where the good news is. The downside of it is, it's not just our warehouse workers. We also have our carriers, which are outside contract, and our loaders, which are outside contract. But because they work on site, they have to meet the same rules. And we're working through those processes right now. There's a potential of close to $150 million in sales at risk for November and December if the warehouse were to shut down. That's a big hit. But we're not going to let that happen. Distributor revenues, a portion of that as well. So but we've got contingency plans in place to keep the doors open and move. There would be a potential for a reduction in services. So if we could not get the people back on place, we would start by, eliminating things like single bottle picks, which are part of the allocated process. But we don't close it down. We just have to shut it down when we don't have the personnel to load the back of the trucks. But Nikki and her team are doing everything they can to make sure that we keep those doors open.
You always can get yourself and Mr. Fleming involved in this thing and get going there too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And if you need, you can ask us. We'll help too.
We could take some truck loads back.
Yeah.
Well taken.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Commissioner?
Chris, what's our footprint of where we are now? Square footprint.
Oh, we're just over 234,000 combined. When you add the Milwaukee warehouse that's in this building and the one up the street in Millport, it's just under 235 combined for warehouse space.
Thank you.
So we're in negotiations with a few different properties. Is there anything, do we have any sort of, I guess what I'm getting at, my concern is just with the amount of interest in industrial, large lot industrial, and the constraint on the supply. Do we have any sort of exclusivity in terms of our negotiation with some of the properties we're more interested in, or are we kind of at risk for anybody swooping in at any time and kind of taking them? Because it's my knowledge, I just think there's very few properties out there that are really going to fit our needs. And I guess I'm just wondering how that's going, and do we feel that it's going timely enough to actually get a property, one of the ones we need?
So that's a great question, and I'm sure, as you're well aware, you're always at risk. It's about how fast that process moves and how much money you have. And we feel that we're in a good place with the developers that have responded to us, the fact that they've engaged us and are willing to negotiate with us. They find us to be a good business partner. And after all, I believe we are too. We're the state. So I think we have an advantage with that because we are the state and they know the contract that they'll receive with us. And I think that what we've done now is narrowed it down to these few properties that we're in negotiations right now. They're committed to us and we like the property. So now it's about, when we started this process over 2 years ago, this was pre-pandemic. So our budget considerations at that time were what they were. And as we are all aware, everything has gone up. So we have to be conscious of that too and understand that we have a budget to work within. And we have to be able to, manufacture the building that we need to be successful for many years to come. And we're working through those steps right now.
Well, I think you're doing a good job of letting the legislature know that supply chain issues are serious as heck, and that there's going to be ramifications of this thing regardless. I mean, where you are today and where you're going to be with building material and everything else is a whole different ballgame.
You're right. There's a lot of juggling, a lot of juggling balls in this concept. I mean, it's kind of the book Juggling Elephants. There's a lot of those, everything from COVID to vaccination to properties to valuations to space.
I think Steve has done an excellent job with the legislature of keeping them abreast of what our potential problems are. I know you have too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to see if Dashida's on the line?
I'm sorry?
Do you want to see if the city of Portland's on?
Sure.
Dashida, are you on the line? Okay. Guess not.
Yeah, I can't get a hold of her. And I haven't seen the presentation, otherwise I'd jump in and give it.
Thank
So
you.
we'll have to get back on the agenda. Sorry about this.
Yeah, no worries.
I didn't.
She said she hasn't been able to reach her and she doesn't know the presentation well enough to give it.
Okay.
So maybe next month we will get them back on.
Good enough. Rich Evans, are you on?
He will be virtual.
Okay. The marijuana violation reset process. Rich, are you there? There you are.
Yes, Commissioner, I'm here. Members of the Commission, Chair, my name is Rich Evans, and I'm the Senior Director of Licensing and Compliance. And today I'm here to give you an update on a project that we're working on in the Administrative Hearings Division. Staff are currently reviewing pending and uncharged cases that are currently pending with our Administrative Hearings Division. Each case will be reviewed for severity, timeliness, and license cooperation to determine if the charges are more appropriately handled by a written warning instead of a formal disciplinary process. We currently have a large backlog of marijuana cases at AHD, and factors including COVID had led to an unmanageable backlog. During the months of October, November, and December of 2021, staff will continue to evaluate the backlog and look at implementing internal policies and practices that will alleviate this from happening in the future. These strategies include adding 4 additional case presenters, which have already been approved by the legislative session, giving more latitude and policy to regulatory specialists in the field to gain voluntary compliance when they're working with licensees, and instituting a self-imposed charging deadline on violations by AHD. I began reviewing the cases, and I believe what you have in front of me is just the start of the cases that I would like to move from formal discipline to just a written warning. As you can see, some of the incidents, there's 3 on this list, occurred back in October, November, and December of 2019. They are currently in the formal process, but they are a theft of a product on 2 cases, and then another one is a security requirement where they didn't have the proper security requirements. In checking on these violations, we have had no additional theft of products, and the security requirements were fixed by the licensee within a short amount of time. I am continuing to review the case log and the cases that are currently pending. I have reached out to inspectors on several of those cases, or I'd have a bigger list to make sure that the licensee has alleviated the problem that was found. Obviously, I'm starting with the cases that are currently pending in AHD, and I will continue to move through the cases from the oldest to the newest and continue to update the Commission in the next couple of months on this project. We do have the authority or latitude to do this without Commission approval. However, I believe in transparency and letting our folks know, and you as the Commissioners, what we are doing internally. I will be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners?
Just a comment, I think this is great and it's excellent work. I think it was a long time coming. I know the everybody kind of met with the industry folks, and there was a lot of discussion on it. And I think it's, just stuff always takes time, and some of these violations are older, but I think it's a really great step in the right direction. It's all working together and getting through the backlog. So thank you.
Yeah.
How big is the backlog roughly?
What I'm trying to do, Commissioner and Chair, I'm trying to go through them, but there are cases. As you know, our case management system isn't the best, and so we are looking at it. But when I started, there were almost 500 cases on the list. I have found that some of those have already been adjudicated, but I would estimate at this point probably about 350 cases, ranging back to, I think there's one from 2018, 2019, with the majority of the cases from 2020 and 2021.
So I'm not going to hold you to it, but just roughly give us a timeline where this will be completed.
I will be done by December, so I will report in the November commission meeting and then the October commission meeting, and then implement the policies for internal, basically implement the internal policies on January 1.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
That's great. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Rich. Commissioner?
Move to approve the warning notification report.
Okay.
Please take the roll.
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Miletus,
Yes.
Commissioner Laval,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes. Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll start the contested case. Good morning. Are we back on record?
We are back.
Very good. Good morning, Mr. Shine.
Morning,
Chair. I tell you, Attorney Shine. And you're up.
Thank you, Chair Rosenbaum, members of the commission. I'm Michael Shine from the Administrative Hearings Division. Before you for consideration is whether to enter the proposed order in Anworth Inc., DBA Luminous Botanicals, as a final order. The case is based on a second amended notice of proposed civil penalty and label denial dated October 14, 2020. A motion for summary determination was filed by licensee and it was denied by order entered January 29, 2021. The case was then heard on the merits on February 1, 2, 3, and 3 of 2021 before Senior Administrative Law Judge Jennifer Rackstraw. Licensee Anworth Inc., DBA Luminous Botanicals, was present through its two corporate principals, Sally Allworth and Devin Anthony, and they were all represented at the hearing by attorney Kevin Jacoby of Greenlight Law Group. OLCC was present through packaging and labeling specialist Anthony Geltoski, and the agency was represented by myself, case presenter Michael Shine. 49 exhibits were admitted into evidence. In addition, demonstrations were provided by both sides using actual examples of the physical package and label. The following witnesses testified for OLCC. Jamie Dickinson, former OLCC packaging and labeling specialist. Anthony Geltoski, current OLCC packaging and labeling specialist. TJ Sheehy, OLCC Director of Analytics and Research. Mandy Standiford, who at that time was the OLCC Marijuana Compliance Technician. And Jesse Sweet, the former OLCC Director of Administrative Policy and Process. The following witnesses testified for Luminous Botanicals. Devin Anthony, Corporate President, and Sally Allworth, Corporate Secretary and Manager of Compliance. The parties filed a total of 6 post-hearing closing briefs arguing the evidence and issues. A 51-page proposed order was served on all parties August 25, 2021. That order proposes that this commission enter orders. First, that Luminous's label application 853 for the trial-sized vials of its universal cannabis tonic be denied because the package is not affixed to the labels. 2, that from September 11, 2018 through March 31, 2019, on approximately 100 separate days, licensee transferred approximately 34,741 trial size vials of UCT, which means Universal Cannabis Tonic, cannabinoid tinctures for ultimate sale to a consumer with labels that had not received approval from the Commission in violation of certain applicable rules that are cited in the proposed order. And 3, that for these violations, a civil penalty of $100,000 should be assessed. Staff has not filed any comments and instead asked that the Commission enter the final order as proposed by ALJ Rackstraw. Luminous Botanicals has filed exceptions, and now is the time for arguments on their exceptions. Because they have filed the exceptions, Luminous will go first. Staff should then be given an opportunity to respond to Luminous's arguments, after which time the Commission will go into deliberations to consider the matter. Unless there are questions, I will turn the matter over to Greenlight Law Group. I believe I heard that it was Mr. DeWeese, but either Mr. DeWeese or Mr. Jacoby.
Okay.
May it please the Commission. Good morning, Chair Rosenbaum, Commissioner Curran, Commissioner Floyd, Commissioner Harper, Commissioner Miletus, Commissioner Reval. My name is Andrew DeWeese, and along with my associate, Kevin Jacoby, and our firm, Greenlight Law Group, we represent the licensee in this matter, Luminous Botanicals. Here with us today are the 2 owners of Luminous, Sally Allworth and Devin Anthony. Our remarks to you today will be focused on the policy implications of this case, reserving oral presentation of our legal arguments for judicial review, should that be necessary. We ask this body to consider the nature of the violation described in the proposed order, the mitigating factors, the particular circumstances of this case, and the likely impact of imposing a civil penalty. And in order to avoid the inequity that would most surely occur if the proposed order is approved by this Commission, we ask that the case be sent back to OLCC staff with instructions to conclude this matter with a written warning. As we discuss the facts of this case, mindful of our shared responsibility to seek an outcome in accordance with the regulatory expectations of the people of the state of Oregon, I ask you to consider 2 questions. Number 1, what regulatory interests are served by a $100,000 civil penalty in this particular case? Number 2, what kind of message will the proposed order in this case send to licensees? And is that the message the commissioners want to send? Luminous Botanicals is a true Oregon-grown business run by Oregonians for Oregonians and solely owned by founders Sally Allworth and Devin Anthony. Sally and Devin were motivated to found Luminous Botanicals by their belief that cannabis can change lives, much as it has changed their own lives and helped them overcome chronic pain. They were the first processor in the entire country to become Sun and Earth certified, which is a stringent certification that focuses on earth regeneration, human empowerment, and community engagement. Luminous has, for many years, been an active participant in industry organizations and OLCC rules advisory committees. This is a company whose founders have committed countless hours to the betterment of this industry because they genuinely care about operating an ethical business that makes a healthy product that helps people. Luminous Botanicals' flagship product is their Universal Cannabis Tonic, which is a full spectrum oil-based tincture designed to be eaten, rubbed into sore muscles and aching joints, or used in a variety of other ways. It is made with simple plant-based ingredients and contains no sugar or artificial flavors of any kind. This is a classic Oregon product of the highest quality, made with respect for both its consumers and the employees making it, and available nowhere else in the world because of the unique ethos, love, and commitment of our state's people. It is products like this and companies like Luminous Botanicals that make Oregon special, that make Oregon, Oregon. This case began as a low-stakes appeal of a packaging denial in April 2019, stemming from what Luminous believes to be a respectful and non-acrimonious disagreement regarding the method of attachment of the sample vials to its label. This is an example of a trial-sized vial. It's all very simple and intuitive from a consumer perspective. You just pop off the lid and measure the amount of product you're consuming by looking at the amount of oil in the glass vial. The big concern Luminous had with the flag label the agency was insisting on was that consumers would not have been able to see how much universal cannabis tonic they were consuming because the flag label obscured the middle quarter of the glass vial. The product's label indicates that first-time users should start with a quarter dose, and so partially obscuring the glass vial would thus make it more likely that a consumer would unintentionally overconsume. Obviously, overconsumption, especially unintentional overconsumption, is something we should all be concerned with. In the spirit of collaboration with and without the aid of counsel, Luminous worked with agency staff to try to overcome their concerns. When they were unable to reach a resolution, they did what they had the option to do. They asked for the ability to pursue their arguments in an appeal. During the course of the appeal of the label denial, OLCC staff initiated an enforcement action against Luminous based on a claim that the labels they had used during the sell-down period of August 15th, 2018 to March 31st, 2019 had never received label approval by OLCC. However, as the proposed order finds, OLCC staff was mistaken. Finding of fact 13 from the proposed order states, a printout from OLCC's packaging and labeling system shows that Ms. Dickinson changed the status of licensee's 2017 label application number 853 to approved on June 7th, 2017. In other words, the underlying assumption in the 2019 investigation and the violation at issue in the proposed order was that Luminous Botanicals had never secured approval for the vial attachment concept, and the proposed order confirms that this underlying assumption was incorrect, factually wrong. OLCC staff did not concede this point until after the hearing closed. Think about that for a second. As a conscientious business person, you are in constant open communication, as the proposed order finds, with your regulatory agency. You come to a difference of opinion with your regulator, and you initiate an approved process to move that difference of opinion to a higher decision maker. And then you get hit with a huge violation based on a false factual assumption stemming from the regulator's inability to properly read or maintain its own records, because apparently they just lost your file. Before I get into further argument, I'm going to set up a baseline understanding of the facts here to help us really understand what happened here and what an injustice this proposed order is. Luminous has been making their unique product since 2014 and sold it on the medical marijuana market prior to obtaining a recreational processor license in 2017. To make the universal cannabis tonic, Luminous uses a lipid infusion process, which is a process that herbalists have used for thousands of years. They use no hazardous material or chemicals in their process, and the process itself is also not hazardous. It is simply steeping cannabis in oil and allowing it to infuse. It is a tincture by any assessment of traditional tincture making methods and technology. Luminous Botanicals principals, particularly Sally Alworth, were active in the Rules Advisory Committee that was responsible for generating product category rules and attempted during the service to advocate that their tincture be categorized correctly as a tincture. Unfortunately, OHA instead ultimately issued a rule that limited products that were classified as tinctures to those using an alcohol suspension. Because Luminous does not use alcohol in their tinctures fell outside this category. After the rules were approved, Luminous went to agency staff with hands open and said, "We may have just been regulated out of existence. What should we do?" Well, the concentrate category definition included a line about extractions made with plant oils. The universal cannabis tonic didn't fit that category well for a couple of reasons. First, because Luminous adds additional ingredients to standardize potency and add flavor. And second, because the weight limits for daily sales are different for concentrates and tinctures. This didn't seem to concern agency staff as they approved the packaging and labeling for the universal cannabis tonic products, which classified the product as both a concentrate and an edible, with the weight and potency clearly printed on the labels and an ingredient list clearly showing that it contained added ingredients other than cannabis concentrate. It also had nutritional information listed, as an edible product would. Everyone, including agency staff, knew that it wasn't a perfect fit, but there was a general sense of collaboration, and they were all working in a new system and communicating openly in a deliberative process. Luminous continued highlighting the need for the tincture category to be revisited, and eventually it was. In June 2018, the rule change was approved, and the tincture category was expanded to include non-alcohol-based products, such as the universal cannabis tonic. Sally and Devin were thrilled to finally be getting the product cleared up and jumped on the label redesign process. They quickly had all of their product SKUs ready for submission as tinctures under the new rules, as soon as they became effective on August 15th, 2018. But then, in mid-July 2018, the agency decided to activate a feature in Metric that sends automatic warning emails to retailers who have engaged in transactions that are apparently beyond the daily sales limits. Recall that the weight limit for an individual purchase of a cannabis concentrate, which the UCT was classified as at the time, is 5 grams. Recall also that with a typical cannabis concentrate, you're looking at a THC concentration of between 60 to 80% or more. So a 1 gram batch of concentrate could contain 600 to 800 milligrams of THC, or even more. By contrast, the largest size bottle of the THC dominant blend of the universal cannabis tonic contains 675 milligrams of THC, but weighs in at 27.2 grams. And that works out to less than 2.5% THC by weight, or far less than even most flower on the market, not to mention concentrates. Nevertheless, because it was classified as a concentrate, once the agency activated the automatic notification, every time a vendor sold a 1 ounce bottle of universal cannabis tonic, or even a ½ ounce bottle, it set off the automated warning emails. So of course, what happened? Retailers stopped selling them and complained to Luminous. Many of them insisted that Luminous pick up their non-compliant product, and Luminous lost accounts because of it. The same day these retailers called Luminous, Luminous called their inspector, desperate for help to address the problem. Remember, this is a problem that existed because of the tincture rule that the OLCC had made, which excluded non-alcohol-based tinctures. Sally and Devin had discussed with the agency many times that the rule was too narrow and was going to result in their product being misclassified. So agency personnel agreed to meet with Luminous, and during the meeting, everyone agreed that this was a problem for which there was already a solution. The new tincture rule was going to take effect in about a month. By the way, Luminous did simply ask the agency if they could solve the problem by turning off the automated notifications for their products, but that was refused. The letter dated July 25th, 2018 from Jesse Sweet was the outcome of the meeting. The letter states that Luminous would be allowed to use the tincture category early, and that the company had to update their label and packaging to replace the word concentrate with the word tincture by September 15th. Luminous was grateful for this outcome, and since they had already updated their packaging in anticipation of the new rules, they asked if they could just submit them for approval under the new rules set a few weeks early, which included the category change and the warning change. The agency agreed, and Luminous submitted them the next day after they got Jesse Sweet's letter on July 26th. However, the agency then declined to approve the trial size packaging, which they had approved previously. Remember, that's the 2017 approval that they lost and eventually had to admit existed after the hearing. Luminous felt this decision was unjust, and after extended dialogue with agency staff, Luminous appealed the decision. The reason the agency declined to approve the packaging was because agency staff questioned whether the method of attachment of the vials to the label was sufficient and whether the vials would also need to have a flag label. The method of attachment proposed by Luminous and previously approved in 2017 was that the lid of the vial is attached to a large label, and the vial may be removed from the label and lid when the products are to be consumed.
Sure.
As I said before, Luminous's main concern with using a flag label on the vial was that it, yes, Chair Rosenbaum.
We have a question, please.
Before we go too far, is the example you're showing us, is that what the product was that's in question, or is that an update? Because you're mentioning there wasn't a flag, but that one has a flag on it.
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Militas. This is actually a sort of a mixture of the previous product, right, with the lid glued to the label, but then it does have that flag label, which is what the OLCC agency staff was wanting us to put on there. This is their currently approved packaging.
Okay, I just was, because I didn't see any glue on that, so just wanted to be clear. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Thank you. The glue is right here. It glues the lid onto the label.
Okay.
Well, the only difference is the flag. The method of attachment proposed by Luminous and previously approved in 2017 was that the lid of the vial is attached to a large label, as I said, and the vial may be removed from the label and lid when it's to be consumed. As I said before, the main concern with using a flag label on the vial was that it would obscure consumers' ability to measure out a dose. So they tried to work with the agency to find some kind of workaround. However, despite extensive dialogue, it became clear that an accord would not be in place by the time of the September 15th deadline. Nevertheless, Mr. Sweet's letter still gave them the option of updating their existing label to read tincture instead of concentrate. So that's what they did, or at least that's what they tried to do. Unfortunately, when Sally Allworth went to her label deck to make the amendment and send them off to the printers, she didn't realize or appreciate that she was operating off the template created to comply with the new packaging and labeling rules. Because of this simple error, the proposed order found that these labels differed from the 2017 approved labels in 8 different ways, as follows. Number 1, the product identity was changed from cannabinoid concentrate to cannabinoid tincture. Number 2, the lettering for the product identity was changed from regular font to bold font. Number 3, the product identity was repositioned from the bottom of the front cardstock page to the middle of the front cardstock page. Number 5, the driving warning was changed from the 2017 rule language, quote, "It is illegal to drive," to the 2018 rule language, "Do not drive." I skipped number 4. Number 4, Luminous's license number was moved from the side sticker to the back cardstock page. Number 6, the cautionary language was changed from cannabinoid edibles can take up to 2 hours or more to take effect to cannabinoid products can take up to 2 hours or more to take effect, because the product was now considered a tincture and not an edible. The first listed in number 7, the first listed ingredient was changed from cannabis to cannabis flower. Because the product was now, number 8, because the product was now considered a tincture and not an edible or a concentrate, the nutritional information that appeared on the 2017 label was omitted from the 2018 label. While the proposed order states that the changes other than the change from cannabinoid concentrate to cannabinoid tincture on the first page is what justifies this violation, as discussed in our exceptions, the repositioning of information and deletion of non-mandatory information are expressly allowed by rule without seeking a new approval, which covers at least 4 of the 7 changes. Furthermore, at least 2 of the changes were a necessary consequence of requiring Luminous to update the product category, in particular numbers 6 and 8, the cautionary language deleting the word edible since it was no longer edible, and deleting the nutritional information because, again, it was no longer an edible. Thus, the only changes that potentially matter under the rule are, first, the update to the driving warning, changing it to the language required by the new rules, and second, the clarification of the first ingredient from cannabis to cannabis flower. It is difficult for me to imagine how anyone could think these 2 changes are material in any way. But nevertheless, these 2 tiny changes are the entire reason a $100,000 civil penalty is being sought in this case. This is unjust. This is not what Oregonians expect out of their regulators. And this is not what makes Oregon-grown businesses thrive. This result cannot be squared with any legislative principles or purpose enunciated by the people of Oregon at any time. Fortunately, we have a system where the ultimate authority to sustain or reject this unjust result rests with you, the Commission. I firmly believe our Oregon alcohol industry would not be what it was, what it is, without the guidance of the experienced business people and entrepreneurs who have, since passage of the Liquor Control Act in 1965, committed to public service for the people of the state of Oregon as commissioners. The existence of this commission itself reflects the wise legislative judgment that the regulatory zeal of agency staff must be tempered and guided by the perspective and experience of public servants appointed from the private sector. It is your judgment we must rely on, indeed, that all Oregonians are relying upon to put into practice and to be faithful to the legislative principles and executive branch pronouncements which guide this agency. Because after all, the legislative purpose here is literally a statement from our great democracy about how the people of the state of Oregon expect their government to regulate their alcohol and marijuana industries. And what they expect you to do is to prevent abuses, to eliminate evils, to protect health, safety, and welfare, to encourage the development of Oregon industry, and to allow Oregon-grown businesses to thrive. In fact, that's language taken verbatim from Governor Brown's statement on marijuana policy. Here's the quote. Governor Brown's team is committed to continued dialogue with the newly developed marijuana business community to ensure that regulations work not just to keep consumers as safe as possible, but also to allow Oregon-grown businesses to thrive. The rules empower this body of commissioners to increase or decrease a sanction, to prevent inequity, or to take into account the particular circumstances of the case. Inequity occurs when inequivalent penalties are imposed for equivalent acts, or conversely, when inequivalent acts draw equal penalties. Therefore, one of the key measures of inequity is a consideration of this commission's precedent with regard to packaging and labeling violations. The only precedent we have is the civil penalty imposed via settlement with Cura in January 2020. In that case, the nature of the violation involved an affirmative misrepresentation to consumers about the product's ingredients. The misrepresentation to consumers was that the vape cartridges had only cannabis-derived terpenes when they in fact had artificial terpenes. That situation involved about 150,000 more units than in this case. To impose the same civil penalty in the Cura case and this case should strike any reasonable person as inequitable, especially in light of the obvious disparity of impact of such sanction against Cura, the largest cannabis company in Oregon, versus Luminous Botanicals with fewer than 5 employees, especially when they're trying to dig out from under COVID. Especially in light of the fact that Cura's mislabeling actually misled consumers as to what they were consuming. It is difficult to imagine any actual negative effect of the hyper-technical violation with which Luminous has been charged. Also, recall that the products at issue here are trial-sized products that Luminous makes to allow consumers to test the product before spending a significant amount on a full bottle. Because of this role, the trial-sized products are more like a loss leader than anything else. The evidence at the hearing established that for each trial-sized vial of the UCT that Luminous sold prior to instituting the flag labels in 2019, Luminous made only 49 cents, accounting only for costs of goods sold, not accounting for label and overhead costs. For the 34,741 packages sold, that amounts to little more than $17,000 in net revenue earned. I suppose it would be gross revenue earned. A $100,000 penalty for activity that earned only $17,000 in revenue over costs is patently excessive and unjust. You should also take into account the impact a $100,000 penalty will have on Luminous compared to what effect it had on Cura. Well, we don't know exactly what effect the $100,000 penalty had on Cura. We do know what effect a $100,000 penalty will have on Luminous Botanicals. It will force them out of business. The proposed order finds that Luminous Botanicals imperfectly executed an otherwise approved change to its existing and approved label by including changes that can only be characterized as minor, insubstantial, yet clearly intended to be compliant with the upcoming rules package. Because of this, the proposed order recommends that Luminous should have to pay the exact same fine Cura did. If this recommendation doesn't sit well with you, it's because it's an unjust result, and you have the authority to rectify it. The rules also allow you the discretion to increase or decrease a sanction to take account of the particular circumstances of the case. I would like you to take the following particular circumstances of this case into account when you make your decision. And keep in mind that all of these facts and circumstances were validated by the proposed order. This is a particularly salient factor that underscores this is not a case where the outcome would further any legitimate regulatory goals. Number one, Luminous Botanicals and its principals were proactive in using all available tools to know and understand the rules, including participating in racks, including the rack that ultimately led to the rules they're accused of violating. Luminous's principals, number two, Luminous's principals were proactive and responsive in communicating with OLCC staff at all times, particularly when the product categorization issue arose, and when working with packaging and labeling staff to address the issue. Number three, Luminous Botanicals is a responsible licensee, a good corporate citizen, and is uniquely compliance focused. Number four, the only reason a violation arose is because OLCC staff required Luminous to prematurely update their labels because of the metric automated warnings. Had they been treated like every other licensee and been allowed to sell through their existing approved packaging, there would have been no opportunity for Luminous to make the error that it did. Number five, the motivating premise for the compliance action that led to this hearing, that the label had never been approved in any form, turned out to be incorrect, and OLCC staff did not concede this point until after the hearing closed. Number six, despite the fact that Luminous's principals were in close contact with OLCC staff, nobody at OLCC ever informed them that the labels they were using during the sell down period were incorrect or not approved. Had they been so informed, they would have immediately stopped using them. Number seven, OLCC staff described the product category matter as an informal process as opposed to instituting a formal compliance action. It is unclear why, after Luminous filed its packaging appeal, agency staff declined to continue the informal process in favor of a formal compliance action. Number eight, because Luminous had not received an approved trial-sized packaging solution prior to the expiration of the sell-down period on April 1st, 2019, they stopped selling them entirely on that date. It did not start again until after they had an approved label about 4 months later. This demonstrates that they, in good faith, believed they were complying with the sell-down rules. Had they been acting in only their pecuniary interests, they could have continued to sell the vials during that 4-month down period without any change to the fine imposed. Luminous's good faith and failure to act in its pecuniary interest when to do so would not have increased the presumptive sanction in this case should weigh heavily. Number nine, and finally, the proposed order verifies that there were no customer complaints regarding the trial-sized vials. This body is also empowered to consider mitigating factors that appear in the evidentiary record. We contend that all of the particular circumstances that I just listed and the facts that make a sanction in this case inequitable also qualify as mitigating factors. In addition, we offer the following. It's another list, but it's only two. Number one, Luminous made a good faith effort to prevent the violation by continuously maintaining contact with OLCC staff and attempting to work with them collaboratively towards a solution. Number two, Luminous also engaged in extraordinary cooperation during the course of the investigation and the contested case proceeding. It is worth mentioning that the only evidence in the record from which the ALJ could determine that a violation existed, that is evidence of what the 2017 approved label looked like, which they then used to prove the 8 changes at issue here. That evidence came directly from Luminous in discovery. Agency staff didn't have it or couldn't find it. Luminous has been nothing but an open book, which should be commended. This factor alone should counsel against any sanction beyond a written warning. I will conclude my remarks by providing you with what I believe to be the correct answers to the 2 questions I posed at the beginning of my presentation. My first question was, what regulatory interests are served by a $100,000 civil penalty in this particular case? The correct answer to this question is that no legitimate regulatory interests are served by forcing a local small business out of business over a hyper-technical, at best, violation, especially where the record is replete with evidence that the business acted in good faith at all times and with the clear intent to be compliant. My second question was, what kind of message will the proposed order in this case send to licensees? And is that the message the commissioners want to send? Commissioners, I'm a cannabis lawyer. I was a founder and early leader of our state bar cannabis law section, and I've represented licensees in this program since the beginning. Licensees tell me their greatest concerns and come to me with their toughest problems, and they have for years. Based on this experience, I have a very clear idea of the message an order like this would send to our industry. The message is that even when dealing with the best of us, a company like Luminous Botanicals, which is everything a regulator could wish for, the Commission is blind to considerations of equity, fairness, and mitigating circumstances. Even Luminous Botanicals, widely beloved in the industry and a shining example to us all, will be chewed up and spat out over an honest mistake. At a time where there are legitimate crises in this industry, with a surging illicit market and continued price instability, sending the message that good faith actors can be ruined by what amounts to an honest mistake will only serve to discourage the industry from embracing transparency and legitimacy. As you consider whether to approve the proposed order, we ask you to remember that the role of the ALJ is limited to finding what is permissible under the rules, not to decide what is good policy for the agency. We ask that under the circumstances presented in this case, which are all verified by the findings of fact in the proposed order, that the Commission exercise its discretion to prevent inequity, consider the particular circumstances of the case and the mitigating factors, and conclude that a civil penalty in any amount is not warranted. Frankly, honorable commissioners, Luminous Botanicals deserves a medal, not a fine. At this point, I would be happy to take any questions from the commissioners. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, council. Commissioners?
I got a quick question, Chair. Just a quick question. Can you, I need to get my timeline in order here. When was the sell down period?
The sell down period was from August 15th, 2018 to March 31st, 2019.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mullins?
Yeah, I gotta go. So remind me why the metric warning was initiated.
I'm sorry, would you repeat?
So there was the metric warning that was initiated that every time they were selling something, it popped up, and why was that? What was the issue that caused that again?
Thank you, Commissioner Miletus. I can explain that. I think the product, the Universal Cannabis Tonic, because it couldn't be classified as a tincture under the old rules, Luminous came to an agreement with the agency staff to have it categorized as sort of both a concentrate and an edible. That's why it had, you know, an ingredient label on it and a nutritional information in the old label. But because it was classified as a concentrate, it also set off those automated warnings when it was sold. The automated warnings were intended to flag a situation where a retailer sold more than 5 grams of concentrate at the time, because that is the daily sales limit that all stores are subject to. But because Luminous Botanicals, so if Luminous had, like the trial-sized vials are less than 5 grams, so they didn't set off the warning. But since the ½ ounce and 1 ounce vials or bottles really of the Universal Cannabis Tonic are, you know, 28 grams and 14 grams approximately, respectively, it would automatically set off the concentrate warning, just because, you know, it was wrongly categorized as a concentrate. It weighed vastly more than most concentrates. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Okay, and then so was that what prompted? That's essentially what prompted the changes in the labeling, or prompted kind of this whole discussion, correct?
Yes. So when retailers begun to call my client and say, "Hey, your product is non-compliant," those retailers, you know, obviously weren't aware of the extensive dialogue that Sally and Devin had with agency staff to you know, make the special categorization of their product. So when the staff turned the metric notification on, the first time somebody sold a ½ ounce or 1 ounce bottle of Universal Cannabis Tonic, they got an email. And so they called Luminous right away. Luminous that same day called their inspector, and that's kind of what set off the whole, hey, it looks like we're not going to be able to sell our products anymore because all the retailers think we're non-compliant. We've already discussed this. We know, we all agree that we're not non-compliant. So what do? Can you just turn off those notifications? That's not something the agency wanted to do. So instead, they all agreed that Luminous could categorize their product as a tincture early, before the rule allowing non-alcohol based tinctures went into effect. And so Mr. Sweet's letter allowed Luminous to change their prior label to put tincture on it instead of concentrate or edible. And what happened was, when Sally went to her computer to do it, she opened the wrong file. She opened the file that she was working on to submit under the new rules. So it had all of the current the language that was about to be current already in there. She modified the wrong one. It was, you know, in the direction of where it was supposed to be, but it has these changes from the original approved label. And like I said, those two changes, the cannabis to cannabis flower, and the driving, the driving warning changed to the current language. That's the entire reason why we're here today.
So what was the date that she opened the wrong file? What was, I'm trying to figure that out in the timeline.
I believe that would have been on either the same day she received the letter from Mr. Sweet, or the next day when she submitted that label, to staff for approval. Oh no! Wait a second. No. I'm sorry. The next day after the label, they submitted their new label for approval. Excuse me. And when that dialogue happened and the agency said, no, we're not going to approve this, then they took the option in Mr. Sweet's letter and said, okay, we're just going to modify, our old label. And that's when the mistake was made. That date, when that file was opened, I don't know exactly what date that would have been. Oh, no, it was, sorry. So it was, I'm being told it was just prior to September 15th. It was September 14th.
Okay. All right. And, okay. And that was when the error was made. And there was a notification that came out from the agency at one point, kind of outlining what the new labels were supposed to look like. Is that, or am I mixing things up here? Or maybe that's a question for you, Mike. I'll come back to
it. I think you're talking about in June, right? Yeah, right before the automated warnings were turned on, there was a new packaging and label rules package, which was approved and set to go into effect on August 15th, 2018. The letter that I talked about from Jesse Sweet is dated July 25th, 2018. So if that makes the timeline make more sense for you.
Yeah, so the amended thing went out in June, talked to Jesse about it in July, and then changed it. And okay.
Right. So they talked to Mr. Sweet about it, in July. He sent out the letter on the 25th. Then on the next day is when Luminous submitted the new label, which is the label that's approval was denied as part of this matter. And when that was denied, on or about September 14th, as the deadline in Mr. Sweet's letter was approaching, that's when they made the error, opened up the wrong thing. They thought they were redoing their old label, but they were editing their new label, unfortunately.
Okay. So then this lost file you mentioned, I'm a little lost on that. So this was a file that had been previously approved, but was lost, and then the agency was subsequently able to find it. Is that what I'm understanding?
May I have my associate Kevin Jacoby answer that question?
Thank you, Commissioner Melitis, for the question. There is a footnote in the proposed order that discusses the agency's practice of requiring packaging and label applicants to delete prior approved versions of the label from the system, and there apparently was no other backup copy of the approved labels kept by staff. So by the time they got to 2018 and they had submitted their new versions of the label, the previous approved version of the label in 2017 had been deleted.
Okay, I see what you're saying. All right. I think that's all for now, Michael. I might have some questions. That's all I got.
Commissioners? Okay, I have something I want to talk about for a minute. You're asking us to send this back to the OLCC for a written warning rather than a $100,000 fine. And I understand that you're saying that there's no regulatory intent served by us imposing a $100,000 fine. And it would be a negative message if we did. So in my mind, you're talking about, well, we're sitting as a court of equity at that point. And on August 12th, 2019, the OLCC inspector met with Mrs. Answorth. And from her testimony, that was the only time, that was the first time that anyone from OLCC told her that the vital size units or product was unapproved. The very next day, on August 13, 2019, the OLCC approved the flag label for vials, size product. Skip 5 months, and on January 21st, 2020, to me, I think that's the first time that your client actually knew that there was a $100,000 fine. I may be wrong, but I think that 5 months went by. So here's my question as a court of equity, is what negotiations, what communications, because you were the one who mentioned that your client sold 34,000 vials and net is $17,000. Now you're sitting there with a $100,000 fine on January 21st, 2020. You made $17,000 or thereabouts. Was there any negotiations at all with the commission or the staff of the commission to negotiate that down? Was there any communications, or that's if we're sitting as a court of equity, I'm going to ask the same question to counsel as well. But talk to us for a minute about, in your impression, what did you do to mitigate that?
Thank you, Chair Rosenbaum. Our law firm got involved in this case relatively late in the process. My understanding is that prior to our involvement, there was extensive negotiation between our client, who was then represented by a very capable lawyer, Matt Goldberg at Lotus Law Group, and that ultimately a settlement of some amount was offered. It was still a very significant amount, and it required our client to admit to a knowing violation of the rules, is my recollection. That is my information about the negotiations which occurred prior to our involvement. And it is, my understanding is that, yes, there were extensive dialogues.
Chair.
Yes, Commissioner.
Is it Mr. Jacoby? Do you have comments? Commissioner Revolve.
Yes, Commissioner Revolve. How can I help?
You have comments?
I don't have anything to add to Mr. DeWeese's remarks on that question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chair Rosenbaum, members of the commission, again, Michael Shine, Administrative Hearings Division. I want to be very clear. We did not bring a $100,000 enforcement action because the language of a driving warning was changed. We're just changing cannabis to cannabis flower on the labels. We brought it due to the public safety risk of over 34,000 products on the market which contained marijuana, which when opened in the usual way by a consumer would likely leave a totally unlabeled glass vial containing a marijuana item. Rule 7030-1A, these are all 845-025. So Rule 7030-1A requires that the label be affixed to the container. And I have a Luminous Sky product with 18 milligrams of THC. This was provided to us by counsel for the licensee immediately before the hearing. It has the vial, it's an example, so it doesn't contain the product in it, but it shows the way that the vial is attached to the cardstock. So for purposes of this item, the glass vial is the container, and the cardstock is proposed by Luminous, or was proposed by Luminous, to be the label. The glass vial has no writing on it, nothing attached to it aside from this piece of cardstock. I'm going to quote from the proposed order at page 39. And this is out of also the packaging and labeling guide that was put out by our packaging and labeling specialist for the use of licensees. The commission has determined that a label is affixed, remember it's required to be affixed, to a container holding a marijuana item if there is a secure and firm attachment such that the label is unlikely to fall off or be removed during transport or normal use of the product. That's only common sense. There's no point in having all this information on a label if a consumer is just going to tear it off and you're still going to be something with marijuana in it with no label on it. So you saw a demonstration for how the licensee proposed people use it, but there's no instruction saying to try to pull it down. I'm ready to drink my marijuana item. Now it contains 2 servings according to the label, but they recommend that if I'm a novice user, I take half the normal serving, so it should have 4 servings. So I'll take some of it, set it down. These are not single dose vials, as I just pointed out, and as stated by the administrative law judge, and I'm going to quote now from pages 39 to 40 of the proposed order. Because the record persuasively established that the trial size UCT vials are not intended to be single dose or single serving size, the likely removal of the cardstock label from the vial will result in a completely unlabeled vial of marijuana product, which constitutes a public safety concern. That's the reason that OLCC packaging and labeling specialist Jamie Dickinson, and then her successor in the job, Anthony Geltosky, rejected the 2018 submission. That's what this fine is levied for, the public safety risk of ending up with 34,000 totally unlabeled plain glass vials of marijuana tincture in the hands of consumers. Now, it was argued that, well, we got no complaints. That doesn't matter. The legislature has required OLCC to ensure that all marijuana packages have a label attached. And looking for a minute at the statute, that statute's ORS 475B.605, sub 1 and sub 3. The question was asked, what legitimate regulatory goal is going to be served here? Well, the statute requires that OLCC adopt rules ensuring that usable marijuana, cannabinoid concentrates and extracts, cannabinoid edibles, and other cannabinoid products have labeling that communicates health and safety warnings, activation time, potency, a whole list of things. This marijuana item doesn't have that label. It did for a little while, but there's still marijuana in it. The OLCC expects something be embossed on or wrapped around that glass vial. So the legitimate regulatory goal is simply to be sure there is a label attached at all times the consumer is using a container that contains marijuana. And then the overriding legitimate regulatory goal is the protection of public health and safety. Each unlabeled vial is a violation. The penalty is set based on the presumption of harm and the presumption of public safety risk. The legislature understood it's very difficult to go out and prove each of these. It's kind of like a consumer protection law. So they set a particular dollar amount for each violation. So I repeat, this compliance action and this proposed penalty is not about a few minor discrepancies in the wording of the label. It's about the public safety risk of 34,000 potentially unlabeled glass vials containing marijuana in the hands of consumers. Okay, but if that's true, why did we bother to prove, why did the ALJ bother to find those 8 differences between the 2017 label and the 2018 label that was sold by Luminous in 2018 to 2019? The whole point of comparing the elements of the label that was found on sale in the retail shops wasn't for the changes per se, but to show that despite clearly knowing that this 2018 label had been rejected, licensees sold it anyway. I repeat that. Luminous knew it was rejected, but they sold the same label as the one that had been rejected. Proposed order, page 45, says this, quote, the trial-sized UCT labels that licensees sold from September 11, 2018 through March 31, 2019 were, and she put this in italics, the very labels that licensee had submitted for OLCC approval in July 2018, August 2018, and December 2018, labels which OLCC denied.
Let me ask you one question. I want to get this out of the way. Understanding all of that, what is Mr. Sweet's part, the incumbent director of the administrative policy? How do you react to him, I guess, giving approval or saying that if it was in compliance with all the rest of the stuff, it would be in compliance? So I think that should be addressed anyway. And I like, he was the head of administrative policy, and apparently he gave some sort of approval.
He gave approval to sell to make a change to the existing 2017 labels, only to change the product ID from concentrate to tincture, and sell up to September 10, 2018, after which point the product had to be in compliant 2018 labels.
Thank you.
He testified that this didn't affect any other requirement other than the product ID. He further testified, or it's further the fact that we don't base any of the damages on which we prevailed on anything that happened up to September 10, 2018. There are enough sales by far after September 10, 2018 to hit the $100,000 penalty. We initially pleaded in the violation the whole period, but we proved, according to the ALJ, the time after the Jesse Sweet permission.
Thank you.
Chair. Michael, I've got a quick question. So was it not permissible during the sell down period to continue selling the vials with the old packaging?
It was permissible to sell the vials with the old packaging, meaning the 2017 label.
Correct.
With just a change from from concentrate to tincture. They could have put a sticker over concentrate that said tincture.
So isn't that what the licensee was doing though, during, after September 10th through March 2019 was selling down these old labeling, the old product labeling and packaging.
No, they were not. And the ALJ found as a fact that they were not. I'm going to detail that evidence very clearly in the next part of my presentation. But the short answer is no, they were selling the 2018 label that hadn't been approved.
Because of the old file mishap, correct?
It wasn't approved because once the packaging and labeling specialist back in 2017 said, well, okay, we'll allow it as long as it's affixed. As long as the container is affixed to the label in a way that it's not easy to remove. Then in July, they had an actual meeting. She looked at it. This was July 23 of 2018. She looked at it and she said, wait a minute, this isn't affixed. You're going to need to put a flag label on. So it wasn't approved. It was recognized that it was not properly affixed when she actually touched the thing.
So what was the September deadline all about then?
The September deadline was an accommodation to give the licensee an opportunity to get new labels ready to comply with the proper description as a tincture.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner?
My question is looking at that vial, that bottle, and you may not be able to answer this question. To your point that nothing is affixed to that bottle, one of the issues we had 8 years ago dealt with dosage of the product. How was that ever approved when nothing was attached to that bottle, when it's sitting there for me to use later? And the big issues back then were a child walking up, picking up that bottle and using it. Do you know how that was ever approved to be sold in any format?
Well, I know that it was approved with, the cards, the image, it was done on an image. It wasn't done on actually having a physical label. The statement, as I said, and it's in the findings, that Ms. Dickinson said, well, as long as it's very difficult to remove it, I'll allow it. And I won't say that the agency, once the agency looked at the thing and actually touched it, didn't agree with what happened back in 2017. I guess I need to also, this is kind of a side thing, but no, it's not accurate that we didn't concede that there was a 2017 approval until the end of the hearing. In fact, I'm looking at Mr. Jacoby and Greenlight Law Group got into this case in the middle of October of 2020, and I immediately told him, looking at an email saying, this is October 16, 2020, Mr. Goldberg certainly raised the issue of initial approval of something related to UCT in 2017. We have conceded that this may have included the sample vials, and Mr. Jacoby wrote back on that same day, if you're conceding the sample vial may have been approved, how do you...
I object to this line. It is outside of the record.
Well, it's actually a direct rebuttal to a false statement that has been presented to the commission about when we conceded it. The reason we reason we said we can go forward is because this case is not about the 2017 approval. It's about the 2018 non-approval. And we don't have to, it may have been approved for a while, but it wasn't approved when it was sold. So I hope I've answered your question. I'll move on here unless you have further. Oh, sure.
Was there a change in the rule in the interim period between when it was approved and when this came about?
Yeah, there was. Previously, packaging and labeling had been under OHA rules. And we, then the legislature said, OLCC should handle the packaging and labeling rules. We put in a whole new set. The OHA rule was a lot more ambiguous about affixed, and what it did was it didn't actually require that so much in its language. It incorporated by reference this NIST, which is National Institute of Safety and Training Standards. It's a big federal book on packaging and labeling, which does contain, the information affixed. But what we did is we put it right in our rule when OLCC issued the rules. So the evidence shows that Sally Allworth, Ms. Allworth, who is the principal of Luminous, who was involved in compliance, intended to resubmit and get approval of a new 2018 label, not to use or rely on the older 2017 label. It was only after Luminous didn't get approval for the trial size vials that they decided to try to end run the OLCC packaging label approval system. And I'm going to detail that in just a minute, but there's nothing in the opinion, there was nothing in the evidence about a wrong file on September 14th or such detailed evidence that was presented to you, but I figured, that's what they wanted to tell you now. It wasn't presented to the ALJ. I think Ms. Allworth just said there was a mistake. Finding of fact number 29 says licensee's July 26, 2018 label submission included sample labels for boxes, bottles, and trial size vials of UCT, because there are 3 sizes of this. And this is still part of the finding. Licensee intended for the labels to comply with the new 2018 rules. That finding isn't just based on exhibits, but on the sworn testimony of Sally Allworth, who admitted that they intended to move directly into 2018 labels for their UCT product. And that's because, they were happy about the 2018 rules because it contained a definition of tincture, which OLCC staff, by the way, worked hard on doing that definition so that it would include not only Luminous's product, but there were other processors who had what was essentially a tincture that didn't fit into the old OHA definition of tincture. So staff worked hard to change the rule, not just for Luminous, but knowing that Luminous had this problem among other companies, and we were trying to provide, essentially good customer service by having a definition of tincture that would help them out. So everybody was happy about this change. There's even a Luminous Botanicals Instagram post dated September 10, 2018 in evidence, showing the 2017 labels in the recycling bin. Threw them out. Finding of fact number 31 says, quote, in an email to Ms. Allworth dated July 30, 2018, Ms. Dickinson stated in part, I reviewed the label applications. The box and bottle labels are compliant, but the vial will need to have a label added to it before it can be approved. On the same day, Ms. Allworth immediately replied, this is July 30, quote, I've removed the sample vial information from the box and bottle submission and have deleted the older versions of the file, which kind of goes back to what you were asking about, Commissioner Melias. I'm hoping we can get these 2 items approved, meaning the box and bottle, while we work on a solution for the trial size vials. A few minutes later, Ms. Dickinson approved the submission for box and bottle without the trial size vial. That's finding of fact 31. This clearly shows that Ms. Allworth of Luminous Botanicals knew that the 2018 trial size vial label was not approved. If that's not enough to convince you, we also have our own words. Finding of fact 32 states that on August 8, this was a week or so later, Ms. Allworth wrote an email to the new OLCC packaging and labeling specialist, Anthony Geltoski. In it, she explained, quote, when Jamie, which is Ms. Dickinson, approved our labels, she did not approve the label cards for trial size vial. So she clearly knew that. And those are her own words. And also, Ms. Allworth admitted under oath at the hearing that she knew that 2018 trial size vial labels had not been approved. Citing to Ms. Allworth's testimony, as well as the exhibits, the ALJ found in finding of fact 31, quote, Ms. Allworth understood that the July 2018 label approval was limited solely to the UCT boxes and bottles and not to the trial size vial. And the ALJ cites testimony of Allworth. So here's what happened here. This isn't about the 2017 label. That label has nothing to do with it because it isn't the label that was sold. What happened is that Luminous submitted a 2018 label for UCT that was approved for the box and bottle sizes, but not for the trial size vials due to the public safety risk of a totally unlabeled glass vial. Ms. Allworth knew that the 2018 label wasn't approved, but nonetheless transferred over 34,000 trial size vials with the very same 2018 label that was not approved. And that's the basis for this proposed penalty. But now I want to really focus on the amount of the penalty, because obviously that's a concern here. That's an important issue. That's a major part of licensee's argument, is that this commission should exercise its discretion to reduce that proposed penalty. Staff feels that the proposed penalty is appropriate as stated in the proposed order. Most of the arguments you've heard is that the penalty is unfair because Luminous was especially cooperative, because this case is incomparable to the Cura case, which was supposedly worse, or because licensee claims, and they didn't exactly prove this at the hearing per se, that a $100,000 penalty will put them out of business. I've searched the transcript for out of business. It's just not there. It's just not there. But they did talk about it would be a financial burden. I think we can all understand that. But we don't know really whether it'll put them out of business. They could have somebody standing in the wings waiting to buy the company. We just don't know. My plan here is to spend some time considering these arguments because we do always try to treat licensees with scrupulous fairness. By the time I'm done speaking, I think you will agree with staff that Luminous Botanicals has been treated very fairly and that their situation is due to their own bad business decisions, not due to any unfairness by OLCC. So, in terms of, I want to give a couple examples of the general fairness with which Luminous was treated during this process. As the record shows, and this has been discussed by Mr. DeWeese, Luminous Botanicals faced a crisis when in July, it was actually July 18, 2018, they learned from a retailer, and their customers are retailers because they're a processor, that the box and bottle size was triggering OLCC compliance warnings. And those compliance warnings went out to everybody. It was just something set in metric. If you see a sale of a concentrate greater than 5 grams, it's a potential violation. There's actually a rule banning a daily sale of more than 5 grams of a concentrate. And so those warnings letters go out to retailers, and on that date, a retailer contacted Luminous and said, we're having that problem. On that very day, Luminous contacted the OLCC. Rather than address this from an enforcement point of view, agency staff recognized that, we had worked together. We were labeling this allowing them to label it a concentrate. We weren't going to go out and issue a bunch of violations for this. And we gathered a meeting of enforcement people from around the agency and met with Ms. Allworth and her partner, Mr. Anthony, 5 days later on July 23rd, 2018. And then staff gathered the information from that meeting, proposed solutions to the key directors, and 2 days after that meeting, on July 25, 2 letters were prepared and sent out. One was the sweet letter we've talked about that basically says, yes, this is a violation, and we're not going to enforce it. What we're going to do is allow you until September 10 to get all your stuff into proper. You should immediately start calling this a tincture. on metric, and we're going to allow you to sell what you currently got for labels till September 10. After September 10, all your labels need to call this a tincture. And another letter signed by Steve Marks, which we didn't send out, but we gave it to the licensee and said, you can send this letter from Steve Marks to your customers, all the retailers. And the letter from Steve Marks says, we're aware of this issue. We're working with Luminous. So long as you're otherwise compliant, we will not be taking compliance action for this. Ms. Allworth said in an email, thank you. No good deed goes unpunished, they say. At the hearing, her lawyer seized upon one part of one sentence in the Jesse Sweet letter to try to defend selling the unapproved labels, but unsuccessfully. Another aspect, so that, I mean, that's an example of fairness to this licensee. Another example, I got this case assigned back to me back in early 2019, and the initial notice, as was mentioned, was sent out April 16, 2019 as just a notice of proposed label denial. Not joined with any civil penalty, because at that time I didn't have reports, I didn't know about the sales that had been going on. But that in itself, just issuing that notice demonstrated fairness to this licensee, because this was the first, and to my knowledge, the only time we have issued a formal proposed label denial. Virtually all the licensees simply don't bother to contest labeling issues. They simply work with the packaging and labeling specialist. They work it out. They make such changes as they have to make. Sometimes the packaging and labeling specialist gives also. It's a give and take, and they make their labels compliant. Here, we issued a proposed label denial because licensee wanted the opportunity to go tell an administrative law judge that we were wrong, that the label was properly affixed.
So there was no negotiations? They just decided at that time to, and you'll have a chance to respond, they just decided that they were going to fight this thing?
Well, I'll detail. There was definitely a process during which they escalated it at various levels within the agency to try to convince us that their label was properly affixed. But in terms of the kind of negotiation you're talking about, that occurred after we issued a notice. You know, negotiation of the penalty, that occurred after we issued the notice about the penalty. And I could address those. I'll get to that.
Okay.
Thank you. So, as you know, the ALJ didn't agree, ultimately found that we were correct, that this was not properly affixed. But out of fairness, the agency gave Luminous the benefit of the doubt as to whether a packaging and labeling decision even warrants hearing rights, and made sure Luminous got its hearing rights on the non-approval of the trial size vial label. So that's how the case stood in the summer of 2019, a notice of proposed label denial. Meanwhile, the UCT trial size vial was approved with a flag label around the vial in August of 2019. At that point, Mr. Goldberg, licensee's former lawyer, was thinking, well, they might drop their challenge to the original label denial because they've got an approved label. You know, out of concern for Luminous possibly waiving some arguments, because I was already starting to hear that there might be a compliance action, I said, don't drop it. You might want that wait, because we may be bringing a penalty charge. Again, that's part of how we try to treat licensees fairly. I worked hard with this, with Mr. Goldberg, and to try to settle the case. I suggested maybe they could detail their actual profits from this, and then we could use maybe a multiple of that to come up with an offer that included some above it as penalty, but still was much more manageable for them. I got approval after a number of meetings with executive staff for this non-standard settlement. I tendered the offer to Mr. Goldberg. Mr. Goldberg actually accepted it by email. 2 days later, he said, I'm withdrawing, and Greenlight Law Group appears. And
So there was an offer of settlement.
absolutely.
And can you, I don't know if it's on or off the record, and the council may object, but can you tell us what that offer was?
Mr. DeWeese, do you object to me telling the chair what the offer was?
This is all a bit irregular because this is all outside the record and all prior to our involvement. I'm at a bit of a disadvantage here. I suppose that I don't object to talking about what the offer was, but the statements about what Mr. Goldberg and Mr. Shine may have discussed bother me a bit. Go ahead and tell them what the settlement offer was. I don't object to that.
Thank you, Michael and Mr. DeWeese. And this is important because you, in fact, brought it up.
That's right. That's the issue in some ways.
It was $30,000. So we feel that in that respect, we treated this licensee very fairly. Those are general examples of fairness. Now I want to speak about the fairness of the penalty itself. Rule 7170 says the commission may impose a civil penalty of up to $500 per day per violation for any of the following. It includes a list of things, including transferring a label that's not in compliance with the rules. And we would say these labels were each not in compliance with the rule requiring that they be affixed. Or transferring, a marijuana item with an unapproved label. So each transfer of a marijuana item is a separate violation. Literal application of this rule to 34,791 marijuana items bearing an unapproved label that Luminous transferred from September 11 to March 31 would be 34,791 times $500 per violation, or nearly $17.4 million. The ALJ agreed the literal amount would be in the millions. That's the proposed order, page 47. At some point in the summer of 2019, I did the math and realized that Luminous Botanicals could be facing a huge crushing penalty in the millions of dollars. With our director's approval, I began working with Jamie Dickinson, who was at that point was the former packaging labeling specialist, but was by then a policy analyst working with the hearings division. And we started working on a way to limit this overly harsh outcome. After lots of work, consultation with the Department of Justice.
Can you remind me the date when you spoke with Jamie about limiting their potential fine?
I don't know the exact date. I'm sorry, Commissioner Belize, but I know that we worked on it principally during the autumn into early winter of 2019, because the policy itself was finalized and signed on January 7, 2020.
Was it predating the settlement with Cura?
Yes, it was predating the settlement with Cura.
But it was January 21st, 2020 that you first issued the $100,000 fine.
That's correct, because we didn't want to issue the charge letter until we had a policy in place that would enable us to not issue a charge letter saying 17.4 million. Frankly, I wasn't going to issue that. I didn't expect that Steve Marks was going to sign that, and nobody at the agency thought that would be a good idea. So we got our heads together to try to figure this out. We consulted with the Department of Justice. I had meetings that included Executive Director Marks and Hearings Unit Director Kelly Ralph, and the agency developed an internal policy guide to limit penalties for packaging and labeling violations. The policy was dated January 7, 2020, and has been admitted as Exhibit A41 in this proceeding. In a nutshell, it limits the amount of penalty we'll seek in a packaging and labeling violation case to no more than $10,000 per day or $100,000 total. Now, I know it has been said that this was developed for Cura, but it wasn't. It was actually developed because of this case, and then Cura came along and happened to be the first one to use it. We still acknowledge that $100,000 is a lot of money. It's a lot less than 17.4 million or even 1 million. We have bent over backwards to treat Luminous Botanicals fairly. So now Cura keeps coming up, so I'd like to discuss the Cura settlement for a minute. Regardless of whether what Cura did was worse or not, and I don't really know, I haven't gone back and read the Cura reports. I don't know if they knew their ingredients weren't approved or if it was just a mistake and it was charged as an intentional or not intentional misrepresentation. I just don't know. But the fact is that Cura immediately accepted responsibility for its wrongdoing, whereas Luminous has fought it every step of the way through multiple internal agency reviews, contested case, to the Luminous time-consuming discovery involving hundreds of documents, to a motion for summary determination that involved DOJ responding, which they lost, to a 3-day contested case hearing, to hundreds of pages of post-hearing briefing, to exceptions, to this day right here. When Mr. Jacoby tried to compare the Cura case to this situation at hearing, ALJ Rackstraw, who's a very experienced senior administrative law judge, immediately said, wait a minute, that was a settlement. You can't compare a settlement to the outcome of a final litigated case. You know, you're here because you think you might get 0 at the end. And that's different. When you decide to go to litigation, it's just the statute applies, the rules apply. You see, comparing that is comparing apples and oranges. Comparing a Cura settlement to a litigated outcome is comparing apples and oranges. In terms of fairness of treatment, to compare apples with apples, we'll need to compare the Cura settlement, which, by the way, was $110,000, with the settlement offer of $30,000 made to Luminous Botanicals, which they rejected. Then you'd be comparing a settlement with a settlement. The offer to Luminous was a lot lower than the Cura settlement. So in this sense, they are being treated fairly in relation to Cura, even if Cura was worse. There's also a point here, I recognize it's a concern about whether they can or cannot pay this penalty. And Cura is a very wealthy, successful company, and they're small. But that's basically, I think we call it the speeding ticket argument. If Jeff Bezos and I get a speeding ticket, should his ticket be $200 million while mine's $100? You know, Mr. Bezos is worth $200 billion, and let's just say I'm working on the first million of my first billion. So to him, 200 million is the same as $100 to me. Obviously, we really can't do it that way. We would have to collect net worth information on every single licensee and try to adjust penalties accordingly. And if you think there's a backlog now, it would be impossible. There's no end to it. So we work on the principle that the fine is the fine, regardless of whether you are wealthy or not so wealthy. So I want to review what I've tried to establish so far. First, this penalty is not based on technical violations, but for knowingly selling over 34,000 unapproved labels that create a public safety risk, or unapproved labels that create a public safety risk of an unlabeled glass vial containing marijuana. Second, OLCC staff treated Luminous Botanicals fairly every step of the way, even bending over backwards to accommodate their needs. Third, the penalty literally calculated under the statute and rule would be in the millions. Fourth, staff, out of considerations of fairness and spurred to action by this very case, implemented a policy in January 2020 that caps the total penalty at $100,000. And fifth, the proposed order is not unfair in relation to the Cura Settlement. I have only two more issues to address. First, the so-called extraordinary cooperation, and second, licensee's bad business decision. Licensee cited to you in their briefing a rule, and I guess their argument, that allows mitigation of a penalty for extraordinary cooperation. The version in effect from 2017 until early 2020, when this was all going on, allows mitigation for the following, quote, extraordinary cooperation in the violation investigation demonstrating the licensee accepts responsibility, close quote. That's 8594B, capital B. It borders, to me anyway, on the Orwellian, remember war is peace, to argue that this licensee demonstrated extraordinary cooperation in the violation investigation, demonstrating acceptance of responsibility when they fought it tooth and nail every step of the way. Now, it's been mentioned that Ms. Allworth served on the rack, which is appreciated, but that has nothing to do with the violation investigation. If it has anything to do with this case, it simply demonstrates that she should have known better, should have known the rules better than the average licensee, so her company should not have been selling an unapproved label. Second, they mentioned that they produced an image of the 2017 label in discovery. That is not extraordinary cooperation. All parties to the contested case have a duty to engage in discovery, including producing documents that they intend to offer into evidence. And they very much intended to offer it into evidence because they built a lot of their arguments around it. In this instance, the agency voluntarily produced hundreds of pages of documents that went well beyond what we intended to produce or introduce into evidence, while licensee only sent the agency about 24 pages, including these images. What's more, the reason they sent these images was not extraordinary cooperation showing acceptance of responsibility, but the exact opposite. It was done in furtherance of their incorrect theory that the 2017 approval of this label allowed them to avoid responsibility for selling the unapproved 2018 label. Third, Ms. Allworth did not cooperate with the agency. She was told repeatedly that she needed to put a flag label or other tiny container label on the glass vial, and she repeatedly resisted this. As early as April 19, 2017, Ms. Dickinson placed a note in the packaging label system which said, quote, the vial is going to need a small container label. Could be a flag label with the required information. Finding of fact number 9. On May 10, 2017, Ms. Allworth objected to a tiny container label. OLCC responded, and this is what I was referring to earlier. The label may be on the card as long as the vial is permanently attached to the card. Finding of fact 10. But the facts show that it wasn't permanently attached. On July 23, 2018, in a meeting between Ms. Dickinson and Ms. Allworth and Mr. Anthony, Luminous was told the vial would need a container label. Nonetheless, they submitted their 2018 labels the next day without one. On July 30, 2018, Dickinson told Allworth that the vial needed a label. Rather than complying, on August 8, 2018, Allworth appealed to the new packaging and labeling specialist, Mr. Geltowski, asking for reversal of this decision and resubmitted the identical unapproved label. That's finding of fact 32 and 34. On August 21, 2018, Mr. Geltowski refused to approve this and added, I would suggest reviewing the small container label. That's August 21, 2018. The same thing they were told in April 2017. Finding of fact 35. Ms. Allworth requested further consideration rather than putting on the flag label. On October 24, 2018, Mr. Geltowski met in person with Ms. Allworth at the OLCC, viewed the labels, and determined that they were not affixed. He told her they needed to use a tiny container label. In a follow-up email the same day, he proposed that they use flag labels. The same thing Dickinson had told her way back in 2017. That's finding of fact 38. Ms. Allworth immediately resisted this and asked to speak with the director of licensing. After doing so, on December 12, 2018, Luminous resubmitted essentially the same unapproved version of the trial size labels without a flag label. Finally, as we've said, in August 2019, they finally submitted a flag label and we approved it. This is not extraordinary cooperation. This is extraordinary stubbornness. Finally, as it relates to licensee's argument that it isn't fair to impose the $100,000 penalty, I think we need to look at licensee's own bad business decisions that got them where they are today. The first and perhaps most obvious after that litany I've just recited is the bad business decision not to simply put a flag label on their glass vial and move on. That's what other licensees have done, and it would have avoided all this conflict. Second is the terrible business decision to sell thousands of units of marijuana items using a label that they knew the OLCC had repeatedly refused to approve. And frankly, if it was just a mistake and they don't know what's on the label that they're selling 34,000 of, I don't care. That's really sloppy business management. You have to know what's on the label of a product that you're putting out in the marketplace. Third is the bad business decision to reject a fair settlement and to choose instead to sink what is likely many thousands of dollars into legal fees to fight this contest, instead of just getting the thing behind you. So what the licensee is really telling you when they argue that the proposed order is unfair and that it will put them out of business is this: please save us from our own bad business decisions. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
No.
Well, were you able to ask them questions later on, or if you
No.
I think this is your time, Matt.
Okay, was there a reason that they gave, I'm trying to recall, what was the reason they gave as to why they didn't just affix language?
Didn't update to a flag label?
Yeah.
For a long time, council today has stated the reason is they were concerned about obscuring part of the vial so that the consumer wouldn't be able to see how much they had drunk from it. And that was the position that they put, that was the evidence that they put in at the hearing. The contemporaneous emails from back in 2018 actually don't focus on that. What they focus on is the contention that it is affixed, that we're mistaken in our understanding and reading of what the meaning of affixed is. So that was the primary argument at that time. So those are the two reasons, kind of at different times. That were given.
Yeah, that's really all I have right now.
Any other comments?
I just wanted to be clear, Chair, that this is only you were talking about violations were after, that the OLCC is considering is for after the time period of September 10th?
That's correct. The penalty is calculated solely based on September 11 through March 31, September 11, 2018 to March 31, 2019.
And so I guess I would just put out a hypothetical. If they had kept the case, if they had just put a sticker on for the tincture rather than the concentrate, then this may not have come to light. It's just that the fact that she, or this person put, Solworth, put 34,000 new labels out there with the unapproved label. Is that a good characterization?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but it would have been framed differently in terms of the legal issues, because of course we frame them in terms of what we've got actually happened. There's still a substantial issue as to whether having subsequently resubmitted, yeah, I mean, it's sort of, there's a lot of possible facts in your question. So if they hadn't resubmitted a 2018 label at all, then I think, yeah, they could have just continued to sell on that 2017. But once they did resubmit, and we looked at it and we made a determination this thing is not compliant because it's not affixed, then there would have been a different focus to the legal issue as to whether we could also rescind the prior approval, because that wasn't really any different. It wasn't affixed either.
Understood.
But it didn't end up being litigated that way.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chair,
Yes.
I do, one last thing before we go into deliberation. I would like to hear from Ms. Allsworth, the licensee herself. I see a lot of correspondence, Ms. Allsworth, on July 30th, 2018, August, from Ms. Dickinson herself, from Mr. Is it Gillespie?
Giltowski.
Correct. In August, the month after, all saying, and there's correspondence between you and them, that the box and the bottle were approved, correct? But the vial, Ms. Dickinson said, will need to have a label affixed to it before it could be approved. Why, my question to you, why did you continue to sell the vial up to March 2019 without approval, without proper, it being affixed properly? Why, I want to hear from you, why didn't you do that?
There are two issues here that are being conflated, I believe, incorrectly. In July and August, we were specifically trying to respond to the automatic alerts that were going out to retailers from Metric, indicating that they were overselling our product because it was a concentrate and it was overweight. And the letter from Jesse Sweet had given us two options. One was to move all of our products immediately into packaging that was in compliance with the 2018 rules. The second option was to simply update the product identity from concentrate to tincture. We attempted to do the first with all of our packaging. So we submitted packaging that we believed was in compliance with the 2018 rules. And the boxes and bottles were approved and the trial vials were not. They were not approved as being compliant with the rules that we were required to have our product in packaging that complied with the 2018 rules on April 1st, 2019, not August or September of 2018. So when the trial vials were not approved under the 2018 rules, we tried to take the second course of action, which was to update our existing packaging, which did not have a flag label and which was never required previously to have a flag label. We tried to update that to say tincture instead of concentrate. And that's when we made the error and submitted, started using a version that had the change in the ingredients and the change in the warning language. And that was the mistake that we made. But we were entitled to to sell our product in the pre-existing packaging with the shift from concentrate to tincture through the sell down period. And that is what we thought we were doing. Simultaneously, we were working on getting a solution for the trial size vials that would be in compliance with the 2018 rules and would be ready to use on April 1st of 2019. And there we felt that the rule hadn't actually changed. The text of the rule had not changed substantially between the 2017 and the 2018 rules around having a label affixed to the vial. Only the agency's interpretation of that rule had changed. We had not been required to use a flag label previously, and now we were going to be required to use a flag label, and we disagreed with that interpretation of the rule. And so we proposed a variety of other solutions. Because the agency's objection continued to change. At one point, they argued that the card didn't qualify as a label at all, which they then changed their mind about. And then we came to the issue of affixed, and affixed. One of the discussions we had around affixed was around the idea that if someone removes a vial to take a portion of the contents, that it couldn't be successfully reattached. So we investigated what's the kind of glue that you sometimes see in other packaging where the item can be taken off and it can be reaffixed. And we brought physical samples of different glues, different card layouts. We met in person with Mr. Geltowski and also Danica Hipsman, who was on the staff at that time. We were actively looking for another solution that would allow our customers to still see the level of the oil and that would be reasonable and cost effective for us to implement. But as far as we knew, we had complied with the intent of Jesse Sweet's letter from July of 2018, and we had no idea that the agency considered the packaging we were using during the sell down period was out of compliance. And we didn't find that out until after the sell down period was over, despite the fact that we had met with them repeatedly face to face. No one ever said, and they were holding examples of our current packaging in their hands. No one ever said, you shouldn't be using this, stop. If they had said that, we would have done it.
Thank you, Ms. Oliver.
So on January 21st, 2020, first time you found out about the $100,000 fine.
That's correct.
Okay, and then tell us what happened after that, very briefly, but tell us, what did you do to mitigate that $100,000 fine?
To mitigate that fine, well, we felt that the entire case against us was unjust and incorrect. We felt that we had all of the violation that's being charged relates to the sell down period, and our genuine understanding and belief was that we had been in compliant packaging during the sell down period. And we felt that the charge was unjust, and so yes, we looked to contest that, and we did ask our lawyer to negotiate with the agency, and that was a process that took many months. When did the offer come through? October, November of that year. So 9 or 10 months. And then even so, $30,000 fine when we genuinely believed that we had done nothing wrong, that in fact, we had gone out of our way to change our packaging early because of these metric alerts. It just felt wrong. And I know that most licensees buckle under the pressure of this process, but the time and the stress and the legal costs is so overwhelming that they take a settlement when it's offered, but we genuinely could not bear to be forced into paying this fine when we knew that we had done nothing wrong, that we had in fact done our very best to comply, and that we did not believe that we had ever created a public safety issue. And so at that point, we engaged Greenlight Law and we chose to go to hearing instead.
I appreciate that. We have, listen, this is, as you can see, this is not an easy case. The commissioners will now go into chambers for deliberations on contested cases pursuant to ORS 192.690 sub 1. Once the contested case deliberations are complete, we will then return to open session to make decisions on the contested cases. Thank you, counsel on both sides.
Chair Rosenbaum, do I get a chance to respond to my colleague?
If it's brief, yes.
Thank you. I just can't let this statement that I have made a false statement to this commission go unchallenged and uncorrected. The truth about whether or not agency staff conceded that there was a 2017 label is that, you know, the email that Mr. Shine references that it may have been approved. That's not a concession. I'll also note that both Janice Dickinson and Anthony Geltoski testified at the hearing that the 2017 label had not been approved. I had to correct that part of the record. I did not make a false statement to this commission, and I would not. What is the last thing that I'll say, and what is really troubling me here, is that it appears to me that the position of this agency is that if you exercise your due process rights and you move forward and you try to go to a hearing, you're going to get a worse penalty, and it is justified. And commissioners, that is very troubling to me. That is all I have. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, counsel. I have to do this again.
I'm going to disagree with you, is that we look at every case independently. And whereas you may have clients who disagree with us vehemently and see that we only go after little guys, I can assure you that is not the case. And it is important that, for the record, that our reputation and our due diligence should never be questioned. Thank you.
We have to go and do this again. The commissioners will now go into chambers for deliberations on contested cases pursuant to ORS 192.690.1. Once contested cases deliberations are complete, we will then return to open session to make decisions on the contested case. Thank you. We are now back in session.
Thank you.
In the matter of the marijuana processor license held by Anworth Incorporated, doing business as Luminous Botanicals, I move to adopt the proposed order as the final order and impose a $100,000 civil penalty.
Commissioner Curran?
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd?
Yes.
Commissioner Harper?
Yes.
Commissioner Militas?
Yeah.
Commissioner Reval?
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum?
Yes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is the alcohol violation stipulated settlement agreements.
Chair Rosenbaum and commissioners, hello, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Andy Chiller with the Administrative Hearings Division, and I'm here to present the stipulated settlements for your ratification. Today we have one marijuana licensing stipulated settlement, two marijuana violation settlements, and one alcohol stipulated settlement for your review and ratification.
Well, let's take the alcohol ones first. Any questions? None? Okay.
Chair Rosenbaum,
Commissioner?
move to ratify the settlement for the conflicts as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Maleta,
Yes.
Commissioner Reval,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes. Marijuana violation stipulated settlement agreements. Any discussion? I need a motion,
Chair,
Commissioner.
I move to ratify the 2 marijuana stipulated settlement agreements as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Miletus,
Yes.
Commissioner Reval,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes. License stipulated settlement agreements on Flower City. Any discussion? I need a motion,
Chair,
Commissioner.
I move to ratify the licensing stipulated settlement agreement for Flowers City as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Miletus,
Yes.
Commissioner Reval,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
No. Well, we got this down pretty good. It took a year and a half or two, but. Next is retail services. Mr. Fleming, it's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, Chair Rosenbaum, Commissioners. For the record, Brian Fleming, Director of Retail Services. Looks like you had a nice long morning here. What I have before you today in your commission materials, appointment of a permanent agent under the spouse child. This is a result of Dan Law's medical disability retiring approximately 2.5 years ago. Normally these come before you about a year, but there's been other circumstances. Obviously, you all know with COVID, but more importantly, with the big move for the store and new commitments at the liquor store. If you look to your, looks like second or third page, I'm doing this all electronically. You can see what's happened here. The store was about 1,800 square feet. It's moved across the parking lot, went to 4,200. All new fixtures, shelving, equipment, security systems. And so Eric has fulfilled his commitment in terms of the spouse child and the future of this store. Excuse me. The permanent appointment would begin after your confirmation. Eric is on the line should anybody have some questions, but this has turned out to be real positive. This is the west end of Eugene, and as Commissioner Reval may remember, this is a good move for West Eugene, and I think this liquor agent is poised for future growth. Side note for Eric, he's very well known around Eugene or the industry. He's one of the more proficient experts in spirits, so he really knows his scotch, his whiskey, but anyway, that's super important when customers arrive. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Commissioner?
This is Commissioner Raw. Eric? You there?
Yes, I am.
You done a great job. You know, it's if I drank scotch any less than I did, you'd have more scotch on your shelves.
Yes, we're happy to be able to provide more services to the public in the new location. It's been a big improvement for both the employees and the public both.
And it's been a great addition to the west side of Eugene. Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
May I make one final comment on this is, so Dan Laws is gone. He's still around. But this guy was over 40 years a liquor agent. And you know, he got used to his routines. Eric's bringing the future, but 40 years as a OLCC liquor agent. We've had several of them over the years, but 40 years. I mean, that's significant. And we'll make sure when we're all done, he'll get a plaque for 40 years. With my, it's like the $5 watch, Brian and thank him. So.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Commissioner.
I move to appoint Eric J. Laws as the permanent agent of store 1188 Eugene West, effective October 22nd, 2021.
Commissioner Curran?
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd?
Yes.
Commissioner Harper?
Yes.
Commissioner Melides?
Yes.
Commissioner Reval?
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum?
Yes. Okay, we are down to Steve. Do you want to make any comments or talk? Tell us why you're not here or something along those lines?
Getting ready to drive over the mountains, Mr. Chair. Hopefully not too late. I don't really have a set of comments. You've had a long day. You know the work we're up to at the agency, ton of big decisions here with relation to our property and warehouse build out, IT systems, everything's progressing. I know we have the challenges we face of costs going up for everything in the world right now because of supply chain problems and skilled laborers being unavailable. So we're going to have to work through these challenges, and I feel good about the approach we're taking on that. We will make sure, as Chris said, to apprise you and give you full input into the final decision on the properties that we're looking at moving forward. We got a lot of information yet to compile, but expect a pretty intensive time period in the next, I'd say, couple weeks to the next commission meeting. And I think it was Commissioner Melides and Floyd. We'll want to be following up with you or was it Marvin? I'm forgetting who you appointed to the committee, Mr. Chair. It was Matt and either Kiana or Marvin.
Who'd you appoint?
Laura will get the record for me and we'll get it right. So anyway, we'll be wanting to do some additional briefing as we move forward towards the commission with you. So thank you. Appreciate your hard work today. This wasn't an easy day.
Thank you. We'll figure out the committee. Thank you. Any other comments or?
I'll just mention, that was a terrible one today. It was tough. I got a lot of respect for Luminous and what they've done. I will just say it's, it came down to, I can't say too much, it came down to a decision that we were forced to make. Again, this is all a work in progress. I hope we can continue to evolve this thing, but it was not a fun decision, but I think, in terms of what we're seeing in some of the health and public safety, labeling is vital. And for the sake of the industry and for the sake of everybody. So as much as that was a tough one, it was, is what it is, and hopefully we can move forward.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Commissioner.
I like to commend both legal teams, theirs and ours, and how this was presented. I think that with legal representation that is out there for our licensees and for our organization, the public is well served. So I know that people don't often praise or give job well done to the legal profession, but both teams did an excellent job, in my opinion, presenting their cases. Thank you.
Good comment. Thank you, Commissioner. I think with that, we're adjourned.